Tinder. Man, it was more than just a dating app, right? It was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. It completely changed the game for how people connect. But its incredible success story is now being overshadowed by a fall that's just as dramatic. So, what happened? Honestly, understanding Tinder's collapse is a huge lesson for pretty much any business out there today.
I mean, at its peak, this app was an absolute monster. It went from this simple idea to a powerhouse, pulling in over $1 billion in revenue every single year. It was, without a doubt, the king of the dating world.
But then, this happened. In 2022, the stock of its parent company, Match Group, just fell off a cliff. We're talking a drop of over 70%. This wasn't just a bad quarter. This was a five-alarm fire signaling a massive crisis inside the company.
So how does a company go from being literally on top of the world to this? That's the big question we're going to dig into. What really brought down the app that for a while there seemed totally invincible?
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll go from its phenomenal start to its current problems. Then we'll look at the perfect startup storm that made it so huge, where the business model started to crack, why users started swiping left for good, and finally, what we can learn from what went wrong.
So, let's set the stage. To really get why the collapse was so big, you first have to appreciate just how massive Tinder was, and how chaotic its fall from grace really got.
You know, the signs of trouble were everywhere, and they were impossible to ignore. The company burned through five different CEOs in just 4 years. That kind of chaos at the top isn't just a sign of instability, it's a flashing red light. Insiders literally described it as a company in total cratering.
But before all that chaos, there was just magic. Tinder's early success wasn't some accident. Nope. It was the result of a perfect mix of timing, tech, and honestly brilliant psychology. So this magic formula really had 3 parts. First, the timing was perfect for millennials, a generation that was so ready for a new way to date. Second, the psychology was genius. That whole double opt-in swipe system, it completely got rid of the fear of rejection. And third, the tech. It just perfectly rode the mobile wave, turning dating into a super addictive game on your phone. And oh man, did it work. It worked better than anyone could have imagined. At its height, the average user was spending 90 minutes a day on the app. 90 minutes! That's an insane level of engagement. Most companies can only dream of that. They had completely nailed it.
But you know how these stories go. Just when it seemed like nothing could go wrong, it did. The very foundation of Tinder's business model started to show some really serious cracks.
And right here is the fundamental problem. Think about it. The app makes money when you stay single, when you keep swiping and keep paying. But what do you, the user, want? You want to find someone and delete the app. Over time, people really started to feel this conflict, and it created this deep sense of distrust. And while Tinder was dealing with that problem, the competition just exploded. One of their own early team members, Whitney Wolf, left to start Bumble, which put women in control of starting the conversation. Then you had Hinge, which came out swinging, marketing itself as the app that's designed to be deleted. All of a sudden, Tinder wasn't the only game in town anymore. And then came this problem, market saturation. Just look at the data. By 2019, 30% of people in the US had already tried dating apps. A year later, that number was exactly the same. The well of potential new users had basically just dried up. So the business model was cracking, the market was full, but the next wave of problems was even more fundamental. The users themselves, the people swiping, were getting deeply unhappy with the whole experience. So inside the app itself, this really frustrating dynamic was playing out. On average, women are way more selective with their swipes than men are. What this created was an ecosystem where a tiny percentage of men got most of the attention, leaving the vast majority of guys with hardly any matches and a whole lot of frustration.
And look, this wasn't just a Tinder problem. This was an industry-wide feeling. A mind-blowing 79% of users said they felt totally frustrated with dating apps. This burnout meant people weren't just leaving Tinder, a lot of them were giving up on online dating entirely.
But maybe the single biggest failure was a generational one. See, Tinder was built for millennials who were okay with hookup culture and grew up online. But the next generation, coming up, Gen Z, they have totally different values. Many find hookup culture yucky. They're more anxious about online stuff, and they really prioritize safety. Tinder just never evolved to meet them where they were.
Okay,
So we've seen all the pieces, right? The shaky business model, the competition, the user frustration, and that huge generational shift. Now, let's put it all together and see what the final collapse actually looked like.
The consequences were severe. You had the founders suing their own parent company and walking away with $441 million, a clear sign of chaos. Then came that 70% stock drop in 2022, and of course, that revolving door of CEOs. The crisis got so bad that the head of the entire Match Group had to personally step in to try and fix the mess.
So, after all that, what are the big takeaways here? First, your audience is always changing. You can never assume they'll be the same forever. Second, internal drama and lawsuits will eventually cripple your company. Third, when your core product is broken, don't get distracted by shiny new trends. Fix what actually matters. And maybe the most important lesson of all, what made you a hit in 2012 is not guaranteed to work today. The world changes and your business has to change with it.
And all this leaves us with a really fascinating thought. Before all these apps, how did people meet? Well, the number one way was through friends, and number two was at school. As more and more people get frustrated and log off, a huge opportunity is opening up. The big question is, who's going to be the one to figure out the next great way for people to connect?